Welcome back. The former head of England's coronavirus vaccine delivery drive has been drafted back into the job from Downing Street amid rising concerns over the rates of coronavirus as we head into winter. Dr. Emily Lawson had been behind the original success of the rollout of the COVID-19 jabs, but was seconded to Number 10's delivery unit, a team in charge of ensuring the government delivers on its policies back in April.
But now, in a move which could indicate the pressure ministers expect the NHS to come under this winter, Dr. Lawson has returned to the health service as it steels itself for the winter months. It has come as scientific advisers told the government that it must ensure Plan B restrictions to tackle corona and they should be rapidly employed. Now, sorry, the reason I lost my breath there is you know how upset I am about this. I just think that it's not necessary, but we've got someone to talk to us about that.
We have. For more of the country's battle against this virus is Rebecca Butler, a retired nurse turned barrister and also a trained vaccinator. So good morning.
Good morning,
to have you here.
Rebecca.
And we are talking about maybe it's confusion, maybe it's exhaustion, but we're getting so much information bombarded onto people and they're thinking about past bygone promises. We were told once we'd had the vaccination, we could move on. We'd need to learn to live with COVID and not be in constant lockdowns. So more information coming out today, the need obviously for people to get the boosters, but also this Plan B. Do we really need it? So what's happening? You can give us then your sort of view on the latest on COVID.
Well, all I would say is that, the virus isn't really playing by our rules. So if we had been discussing this in the context of the Alpha variant, which hit us in January of this year, then, you maybe had a good argument. But I'm afraid we've had the Delta variant, which was like a tsunami that hit us very hard. And it kept us
The vaccine still works against the Delta. Even if it's slightly less, it still works. And we've seen the break between hospitalisation
I can just finish what I was... finish what I'm saying,
I was just putting a point to you.
Yes, well, the Delta variant has been like a tsunami, and now the Delta variant itself has mutated, as viruses do, and that's what we expect, and that's what we're looking for. And actually, we have breakthrough infections with the vaccine. So we have a problem in that there is still a significant proportion of people who are not vaccinated. Now, the impact of unvaccinated people on our hospital red lines is very, very significant because we also have breakthrough infections. So we have a lot of beds occupied with one single disease that didn't exist 2 years ago. So we have to stay alive, we have to stay agile, and we have to be ready to bring in further mitigations. And there is no better place to look than our closest neighbours in Europe. Look at France, look at Spain, look at Portugal, look at their hospitalization rates. Don't look at their case numbers, look at their hospitalization rates. The more vaccinated people you have, the lower your hospitalization rates for this vaccine. The numbers are there, they're not hard to interpret. The message is go and get your vaccine.
No, Rebecca,
if you don't,
the other thing is you're not taking into account anyone's natural immunity. You're not taking into account people's T cells. I mean, what we're finding now is the NHS England did say that the trend for what's going on with COVID is not alarming, and COVID is not the problem. Actually, the problem is the rhinovirus in adults and RSV in children is far more worrying. So, it feels to me that you're heaping more fear, and we're trying to talk about the fact that people have got COVID fatigue. And it feels to me that I'm a bit curious as to your thoughts on this, because it's not actually the case.
Well, if I may address the very point that you've said, is that people have natural immunity. If you are under 25, yes, you do have T killer cells.
If you're under 50, not 25.
I'm sorry, can I please finish? If you are under 25, you have your T killer cell responses. That wanes with age. There is no such thing as natural immunity to a novel pathogen, which is why we've got a vaccine that inhibits the spike protein embedding on the cell wall. That is the whole purpose of the vaccine, is to inhibit the a virus's ability to infect cells. When you say we've got natural immunity, you need to do so from a position of knowledge, not from a position of what Twitter says. Because natural
Rebecca,
immunity...
I'm going to just stop you there. I'm just going to stop you there, if you don't mind, for a moment. Actually, thank you so much for your help, but unfortunately, we are coming from a point of knowledge. We're very well read, and when I was speaking about natural immunity, all the studies that have come through is that people that have recovered from COVID are far better and far more likely to be able to get rid of COVID than those that have been vaccinated, because as you know, that if you have natural immunity, then you must be going against all these studies that are coming out of Israel, that are coming out of France and Germany. So sorry, you know better. Please do tell me why these studies have come out now, the recent ones that came out last week, that say natural immunity against this virus is far greater than if you have the vaccine, which you should do if you are vulnerable. But it would be better, you're better placed if you've had it already and you're recovering. But please do.
That is not correct. The best immunity is to have the best immunity is to have prior infection plus the vaccine. That gives you 90.
None of these studies have said that.
So can I move, because I think that...
No, I'm sorry, Esther, if I please, I cannot let this misinformation be advanced
But I
any
can't let
further.
your misinformation come across, because the studies I have read have completely stated that. Thank you so much.
One very important point on this is that 25% of people who have had coronavirus infection without vaccination, 25% of those people do not produce antibodies, so they remain vulnerable to further disease. This is why people, whether they have had the vaccine or not, whether they've had the infection or not, I beg your pardon, they must go and get their vaccine. It is really important that we push the message that vaccination is the cheapest and the most efficient form of combating this epidemic. Until people do that, they cannot take a risk of being that person who ends up in hospital, that person who ends up in ICU. It is really irresponsible to suggest that natural immunity far exceeds the vaccination immunity, because it does not. You do not get adequate protection without the vaccine.
Rebecca, we agree with the vaccine and people being vaccinated. That's not the point. We were talking about the different information coming out and whether it was Plan B. And I want to now look at whether we do need Plan B if we don't, because some of the information I'm reading about sort of hospital, how many people are in a hospital, back in the peak in April 2021, a third of the hospital beds and ventilators weren't used, and neither were the overflow of the Nightingale hospitals. Now we've got less people going into hospital and less on ventilators. So all we need to talk about here is we need to learn to live with COVID, because there's lots of things with lockdown and, has actually made things worse. As we now know, we've got 60,000 potential deaths with the flu this year. So what we're talking about, how can people get on and back to living their life and not having this implementation of Plan B?
Well, we can look globally and we can see how other countries are doing it and how they're coping. As I started out with this discussion, look at France. They have had minimal interventions in place, minimal mitigations. People still wear masks, and they have the COVID certification system. That has had a massive impact on vaccination uptake. So, yeah, Plan B has a lot in it. Maybe we don't need all of Plan B, because I think people are tired. I think people are tired and exhausted at the thought of another lockdown. But the way to prevent a lockdown is to encourage 100% vaccine uptake. Look at Portugal, look at France. People will not be able to tolerate another lockdown, and we must do absolutely everything we can as a society to prevent a situation where schools are having to shut down again, because schools are the main driver of
Thank you.
infection.
Thank you for being with us this morning, and thanks for discussing that. And obviously, we want to hear what GB viewers say, because obviously, in the adult population and people who are vulnerable and people who've got underlying health conditions,
It's a fantastic thing, but
Exactly,
she's
but
completely
question
wrong when it
about-
comes to everything else.
to children. Look, we've had a guest on. She's been a guest on today. So let us hear what your views are. Do you feel exhausted with all of the information swimming around about COVID and what you need to do? But look, we've still got plenty more coming on Saturday Morning UK. But first, here's the latest news lines.